You have promised that no matter what was in it, you don't want to see an election now, so you are going to vote for it. There was no national pharmacare. You'd asked for that. They didn't really move much on that except for more of a promise. They did not move to enhance paid sick leave like you told me you wanted. Can you and will you support this budget?
Well, for me, Evan, the question really comes down to in a third wave with record numbers of cases, field hospitals being set up, people getting sick, racialized people, frontline workers, essential workers being sick, poorest communities in our country, some of the poorest communities have the highest rates of infection and the lowest rates of vaccination. In that context, Canadians were asked the question, would they like an election right now? And they said it would be unfair and unsafe. I absolutely agree. In fact, I would add irresponsible. It would be irresponsible for a leader at this time, at this stage of the pandemic, to in any way trigger an election. So I've made it really clear, no, I'm not going to be irresponsible. I'm going to do what's in the best interest of Canadians. But there's lots of ways to critique what the Liberals have done. One of the biggest problems in this budget is the question that was on so many people's minds: who is going to pay the price of this pandemic? Who's going to pay for the recovery? And the Liberals have answered really clearly that it's not going to be the ultra-rich. They did not bring in any wealth tax on the ultra-rich. They did not bring in the measures that were required to get after the fact that you got web giants and some of the wealthiest people, the richest people in our country, the 44 richest billionaires that increased their wealth by $62 billion. And after this budget, they're not going to have to pay anything more. That is wrong. That was a choice that this Liberal government made, and that was a wrong choice.
Okay, I'll tell people what they did do. Was there a wealth tax? No. Was there a big tax on billionaires? No. What they did do is a 10% luxury tax on high-end cars, high-end boats and private planes over $100,000. They also slapped on a 3% tax on the digital giants on that. That doesn't raise a lot of revenue, frankly. They say that they essentially are going to grow their way back to pre-pandemic levels of the deficit. They are going to go back to, they say, about $30 billion deficits, pre-COVID levels, within 5 years, based on the investments on things like childcare and green infrastructure. So they don't need to do the wealth tax as you've imagined it. What do you make of that?
I don't think that makes sense. We know that in this pandemic, the richest and wealthiest, the ultra-rich, made out like bandits. Why wouldn't we take this opportunity right now and say, well, to tackle the inequality and to answer the question, who pays for this, why wouldn't it be the ultra-rich? Why wouldn't we bring in clear measures to tax the ultra-rich? That shows to me a lack of courage and really a choice that Justin Trudeau is making. That in this pandemic, when workers lost their jobs, when small businesses were forced to shut down, when all these folks made sacrifices, they're going to have to continue to bear the burden. But the ultra-rich aren't going to. And that, to me, is a wrong choice to make. There's an opportunity now to do the right thing, and the Liberals have failed to do that.
They say they'll get to $30 billion deficits by 2025, 2026, even though it's $354.2 now. What do you make of the child care policy? $30 billion a year over 5 years, rising to over $8 billion in the years after. So some permanent funding. I just want people to understand the context. That does sound like a lot of money, $6 billion a year. I should just say, Quebec currently spends over $2 billion themselves on literally the program this is modeled on. So in your view, do you support this national child care program? Is it enough?
Well, our biggest problem when it comes to the Liberals and their promises is that when it's come to childcare, they've literally promised childcare for 27 years. That's nearly 3 decades. 3 decades of broken promises. And so my bigger concern is that I don't believe that they're actually going to follow through on this. They've promised this again and again. It's like the same rerun of a movie. They made this promise in the past, and I've seen this show before where they make a promise and then they break it. Most recently, they ran a campaign where they promised universal pharmacare in 2019. It showed up in their throne speech where they said they promised to do it. And in this budget, they completely abandoned it. So it's clear the Liberals aren't afraid of making a promise, a bold-faced promise to Canadians, and then turning around and breaking it. So that's the big concern here. There seems to be, in terms of the money, some commitments, but women who have been hard hit by this pandemic, who have lost their jobs or are struggling to care for kids at home while also caring for their aging loved ones, are looking at this and saying, are we actually going to get some help, or is again another phony promise? That's the question that I think people are asking.
Well, you know what we'll do? We're going to go get an answer right now because the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland's about to join us. But you will be supporting this, but you are not, you're critical of it. Okay, NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh, I really appreciate you dropping by.